Hi, this is Wale Awolola. Hope you're well. You're good. Now, from my last posting, where I made a comparison of the tour guide and the Christian worship leader, I have had so many comments, interesting comments, and they've all been good. In fact, a lot of you have said and expressed that you've never seen that comparison before and you thought it was a brilliant idea. Well, thank you very much for that. This is a follow up on that because I mentioned something, so many things I said, but there was something in particular that I said which I thought I needed to share a bit more on. And that is one of the key capabilities of the tour guide, in that they have learned, they've studied the area, the subject area that they're covering. I mean, how would it be to have somebody take you on a guided tour who has no understanding of where they're taking you? To be proficient in what they do, they will have undertaken a study, a detailed and accurate study of their area of subject. They cannot afford to pass on to you inaccurate or downright wrong information or misleading information. They are not even allowed to put their own slant or their own interpretation, but they have to share the facts exactly as they are. The order of events have to be described exactly as they happened, in keeping with history. The same applies to the worship leader, that you must be well versed and knowledgeable in this subject area. You must take a deep study of the texts that speaks and teaches this area of Christian worship. You need to understand how it reads and what it means. Not putting your own slant on it, but exactly deciphering and decoding it to read as it does in context. Understand what it means and how it applies to us in context. You cannot afford to let your knowledge be based on hearsay. You need to engage in to know it for yourself. By way of an example, a scripture verse that has been misunderstood and thus misinterpreted is Psalm 121 and verse 1. In the King James Version, it says, I will lift up mine eyes to the hills from whence comes my help. My help comes from the Lord, the maker of heaven and earth. What's wrong there? Let me read it exactly as is written. In context, it reads, I will lift up mine eyes to the hills, period. From whence comes my help? Question. My help comes from the Lord. In essence, the first was an opening statement. I will lift up mine eyes to the hills. A comment. Then the question, where does my help come from? And then the answer, my help comes from the Lord. Psalm 121 is one of the songs that were written and sang as pilgrims made their way up to the temple in Jerusalem, where they had to climb up the hills. And along the way, this writer says, I will lift up my eyes to the hills. That means I'm setting my focus to go to the house of God, because I'll be seeing all these hills. And then somewhere along the line he asks, where does my help come from? And then he answers it immediately. My help comes from the Lord. Now the misinterpretation has been imbibed that says my help comes from the mountains, that just lift your eyes to the mountains because that's where your help comes from. No. Therefore, the worship leader needs to learn these things, needs to study to know how to interpret it, because when we now lead the people of God in worship, we have to do it in truth, in spirit, and in truth indeed. The scripture tells us what worship is and how God expects us to express worship. Not just anyhow, but in specific order and in content. Now that I have a lot to say and speak on, which will be the content of my next post. I'm just taking the time to encourage you as a worship leader that you take time to study, so that we bring the people into the presence of God with songs that bring help, hope, and healing. This is Wale Awolola. I believe this has been a blessing to you. God bless you. Bye-bye.